Ambassador Sarah Chen stood perfectly still in the center of the Galactic Council's Grand Assembly, her hands clasped behind her back, her face a mask of diplomatic calm. Around her, the representatives of 47 different species filled the massive amphitheater with their various forms of laughter. Some clicked their mandibles in amusement, others released pheromone clouds that smelled of mockery, and a few simply vibrated at frequencies that made the air itself seem to chuckle. The source of their entertainment was floating in a holographic display above Sarah's head. Humanity's latest contribution to galactic civilization. The UES Defiance. A warship that looked like someone had welded together spare parts from a dozen different vessels and then painted it matte grey. Compared to the sleek, crystalline vessels of the Ethereal Collective or the bioorganic ships of the Hive Confederation, it was an embarrassment, a cosmic joke wrapped in steel plating and powered by what the other species generously called primitive fusion technology. Honored representatives, Sarah began, her voice cutting through the cacophony with practiced ease. I present to the Council the newest addition to Earth's defensive fleet. The UES Defiance represents 3 years of our finest engineering and... Engineering! The interruption came from Zextai the Magnificent, the Ethereal Collective's primary representative.
His crystalline body chimed with what passed for laughter among his people.
Honored human, that collection of metal scraps wouldn't qualify as engineering on any civilized world. My species was building vessels that could phase through dimensions when yours was still throwing rocks at each other. More laughter rippled through the assembly. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her diplomatic training held firm. She had expected this. Hell, she had practically written the script for this humiliation herself. Perhaps, she replied evenly, but it serves our needs adequately. Adequately? This time it was Councillor Vorth of the Hegemony Coalition who spoke. The massive, insectoid being's forearms gestured dismissively at the hologram. Human Sarah, your ship's maximum velocity is barely faster than light speed. Its weapon systems are projectile-based kinetics. Its armor is simple ablative plating. My people's scout ships could disable that vessel without breaking formation. The representative from the Stellar Dominion, a being that looked like liquid mercury poured into a roughly humanoid shape, added its own commentary. The power signature alone is laughable. We can detect your vessels from 3 systems away. They burn through space like miniature suns, announcing their presence to anyone with basic senses. Sarah nodded politely at each criticism, filing away every word, every gesture, every contemptuous laugh. She had volunteered for this assignment specifically because she could endure it. Because someone had to stand here and smile while the galaxy's so-called advanced civilizations treated humanity like children showing off a finger painting. You make valid points, she said. Human technology is indeed primitive by galactic standards. Primitive? Zextai's crystalline form brightened with amusement. My dear human, primitive implies a foundation upon which to build. Your species has achieved faster than light travel, yes, but you've done so through brute force rather than understanding. You strap massive engines to metal cans and push them through space with barely controlled explosions. It's like watching someone try to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. The analogy drew fresh waves of laughter from the assembly. Sarah waited for it to die down before speaking again. Nevertheless, we believe the UES Defiance will serve Earth's interests well. Oh, I'm sure it will. Councillor Vorth clicked his mandibles in what Sarah had learned was the equivalent of a smirk. After all, someone needs to patrol the asteroid mining stations and escort merchant vessels. Such humble tasks suit humble capabilities. The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah had heard variations of this speech from every major power in the Council over the past 4 years. Humanity was useful for manual labor, for mining dangerous asteroids, for providing raw materials to more advanced civilizations. They were the galaxy's janitors, and everyone wanted to make sure they knew their place. If I may, came another voice from across the assembly. This one belonged to High Archon Telmesh of the Sacred Orders, a species that had achieved technological transcendence and considered themselves the galaxy's spiritual guardians. The human approach to technology is not merely primitive, it is fundamentally flawed. They seek to dominate nature rather than work in harmony with it. Their ships are weapons of war first and vehicles second. And what's wrong with that? Sarah asked, allowing the first hint of steel to enter her voice. In a galaxy where 17 species have territorial disputes, and 3 major powers are locked in cold wars, perhaps weapons of war aren't such a bad thing to have. The question sparked a fresh round of amusement. Zextai actually resonated in what his people considered a belly laugh. "Human Sarah," he said, "your species has been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 standard years. We have been navigating these political waters for millennia. Trust us when we say that true power lies not in crude weapons, but in technological superiority. Consider the ethereal collective's phase drives," Vorth added. "We can slip between dimensions, becoming untouchable to conventional weapons. The Hive Confederation's bioships heal themselves from damage and adapt to threats in real time. The Stellar Dominion's plasma-based technology can reshape matter at the molecular level. These are the tools of true power." Sarah nodded as if she were taking notes. Impressive capabilities. And yet, if I recall correctly, the Ethereal Collective lost 3 colonies to Hive expansion last year. The Stellar Dominion's border skirmishes with the Hegemony Coalition have been ongoing for 2 decades. Even with all this advanced technology, you still seem to find plenty of reasons to fight. The temperature in the vast chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah had just pointed out the elephant in the room that nobody wanted to acknowledge. For all their technological superiority, the galaxy's advanced civilizations were locked in perpetual conflict. "Careful, human," Vorth's voice carried a warning. "You are here by our sufferance. Earth exists in this council because we permit it." "Of course," Sarah replied smoothly. "I meant no offense. I was simply observing that conflict appears to be a universal constant, regardless of technological advancement." High Archon Telmesh's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a frown. "The difference, primitive human, is that our conflicts are conducted with precision and elegance. When we wage war, we do so with purpose and control. Your species, from what we've observed of your history, seems to approach violence with the same brute force mentality you apply to everything else. 2 global wars before you even achieved spaceflight," added the representative from the Void Touched, a species that communicated through telepathic projections. "Nuclear weapons deployed against your own kind, environmental destruction on a planetary scale. Such enthusiasm for destruction." Sarah felt her diplomatic mask slip just a fraction. "These beings sat in judgment of humanity's past while their own civilizations had been waging wars across star systems for longer than human civilization had existed." The hypocrisy was staggering, but she couldn't say that. Not yet. "We've learned from our mistakes," she said instead. "Have you?" Zextai's form pulsed with what might have been curiosity. "Tell me, human Sarah, what is the primary armament on your new vessel?" Sarah knew this was coming. The question every representative had been building towards since the session began. "Kinetic accelerators," she answered. "Railguns that fire dense tungsten projectiles at significant fractions of light speed." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the laughter began again. This time, it was different. Not the amused chuckling of before, but something deeper. The laughter of beings who had just confirmed their lowest expectations. "Railguns," Councillor Vorth repeated, as if the words themselves were a joke. "Projectile weapons. In an age of energy manipulation and dimensional warfare, humans bring railguns. It's like watching a species discover fire and then trying to use it to perform brain surgery," added Telmish. Such magnificent ignorance. Sarah stood perfectly still as wave after wave of mockery washed over her. She thought about the men and women who had designed the Defiance. The engineers who had worked 18-hour days to squeeze every ounce of performance from humanity's limited technology. She thought about the crews who would serve aboard the ship, knowing they were flying something the rest of the galaxy considered a cosmic joke. But most of all, she thought about the conversation she'd had with Admiral Harrison Chen, her grandfather. 3 days before this humiliation began. "They need to underestimate us, Sarah," he had said, his weathered hands folded on his desk. "Every great military victory in human history has begun with the enemy thinking we were no threat." Let them laugh. Let them think we're primitive and stupid and completely predictable. "And if they're right?" she had asked. His smile had been sharp enough to cut glass. "Then we'll do what humans have always done when faced with superior technology and overwhelming odds. We'll cheat." The memory strengthened her resolve as the Council's mockery reached new heights. Ambassador Kellex of the Nova Ascendancy, a species that looked like living geometry, projected holographic comparisons showing how primitive human weapons were compared to their quantum disruptors. The representative from the Crimson Empire demonstrated how their molecular disassemblers could unmake matter at the atomic level. One after another, the galaxy's powers showed off technologies that made human achievements look like cave paintings. "Perhaps," Sarah said when the demonstrations finally ended, Human technology isn't ready for the sophisticated conflicts you engage in. We'll content ourselves with simpler tasks. Wise, Zextai chimed approvingly. Know your limitations and you'll live longer. Mining asteroids, escorting cargo vessels, maintaining communication relays, Vorth added. Honest work for honest people. The condescension was so thick Sarah could taste it. Perfect. We are grateful for the opportunity to serve, she said, bowing slightly. Perhaps someday humanity will advance enough to stand alongside the great powers of this galaxy. Perhaps, Telmish said, though his tone suggested he found that possibility unlikely. Evolution is a slow process, even for species with potential.
Sarah smiled.
It was her first genuine smile of the entire session. Indeed it is, High Archon. Indeed it is. As the session concluded and the various representatives began to file out, Sarah remained standing in the center of the amphitheater. She watched them go, these superior beings with their advanced technology and millennia of experience. They had just made the same mistake that every bully, every tyrant, every overconfident empire in human history had made. They had assumed that because humans were different, they were lesser. Because human technology looked primitive, it was ineffective. Because humanity was young, it was naive. In 48 hours, Sarah would board a transport back to Earth. She would file her report with the colonial administration and recommend that humanity accept its assigned role in galactic civilization. She would suggest that Earth focus on resource extraction and basic manufacturing, leaving the complex work of governance and defense to their betters. And then she would retire from diplomatic service and take a new position as Strategic Communications Director for Project Ghostlight. The galaxy would continue to laugh at humanity's primitive technology and brute force engineering. They would assign human ships to patrol remote sectors and escort civilian transports through safe space lanes. They would treat Earth like a useful but ultimately insignificant client state. Right up until the moment the UES Phantom decloaked in the middle of their most secure military installation and proved that sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy is the kind that nobody knows exists. But that revelation was still months away. For now, Sarah simply stood in the empty amphitheater and practiced looking disappointed. She would need that expression for the journey home, when she explained to her people how the galaxy's great powers had once again dismissed humanity as irrelevant. The funny thing about being underestimated, she reflected, is that it only hurts if you actually care what the other side thinks of you. Sarah Chen stopped caring about alien opinion the day she learned about the things her species could do when nobody was watching. The day she learned that while the galaxy's powers had been laughing at human railguns and fusion drives, human engineers had been quietly solving problems that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. Problems like how to make a ship invisible to every known form of sensor technology. Problems like how to build weapons that didn't just destroy targets, but erased them from existence so completely that nobody would ever know they had been there. Problems like how to win a war before the enemy even knew they were fighting one. The laughter echoing through the empty chamber was about to become a very different sound entirely. The transport ship that carried Sarah back to Earth was exactly the kind of vessel the Galactic Council expected from humanity. Functional but unremarkable, powered by visible fusion drives that announced its presence across 3 star systems. She spent the journey in her assigned quarters, writing diplomatic reports that painted humanity as appropriately humbled by the session. Every word was crafted to reinforce the image of Earth as a minor player, grateful for any scraps thrown its way by the galaxy's true powers. It was all complete fabrication, but it was fabrication with a purpose. Sarah's first clue that something extraordinary was happening came when the transport approached Earth's orbital zone. Instead of the usual handful of patrol vessels and civilian traffic, space around the planet was nearly empty. The massive orbital shipyards that had been under construction for the past decade were dark, their running lights reduced to minimal power. Even the civilian traffic patterns seemed different, more controlled and purposeful. Orbital control. This is Diplomatic Transport 77 Alpha requesting approach clearance. The ship's captain announced over the comm. 77 Alpha, you are cleared for direct approach to Lunar City. Please maintain heading and do not deviate from assigned corridor. Sarah frowned. Lunar City was Earth's diplomatic hub, but she had expected to be routed through one of the orbital stations first. Direct approaches were usually reserved for emergency situations or classified arrivals. When the transport finally docked at Lunar City's primary spaceport, Sarah was met not by the usual diplomatic staff, but by a woman in the dark blue uniform of Naval Intelligence. Commander Lisa Park was someone Sarah had never seen before, which was unusual in Earth's relatively small diplomatic and military community. Ambassador Chen, Commander Park said, extending her hand. Welcome home. I'm here to escort you to your debriefing. My debriefing was scheduled for next week at Colonial Administration Headquarters, Sarah replied, shaking the offered hand. Plans change, Park said simply. This way, please. Sarah found herself being led, not toward the civilian sections of Lunar City, but deeper into the station's restricted military levels. They passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last. The final checkpoint required biometric scans, genetic verification, and something Sarah had never seen before. A device that seemed to scan her brain patterns directly. Neural security, Park explained, noticing Sarah's puzzled expression. New technology. Very recent development. They walked in silence through corridors that Sarah didn't recognize, despite having been stationed at Lunar City for 4 years. The architecture was different here, more angular and purposeful. The walls were lined with materials she couldn't identify, and the lighting had an odd quality that seemed to shift almost imperceptibly as they passed. Finally, they arrived at a conference room that looked nothing like any government facility Sarah had ever seen. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, technical schematics, and what appeared to be real-time sensor data from across the solar system. Seated around a large table were a dozen people she recognized as some of Earth's most senior military and scientific personnel. At the head of the table sat Admiral Harrison Chen, her grandfather, but his expression was nothing like the calm confidence he had shown during their conversation 3 days earlier. He looked like a man who had been carrying an enormous secret for far too long. Sarah, he said, gesturing to an empty chair, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I didn't exactly have a choice, she replied, settling into the chair and looking around the room. Grandfather, what is this place? I've never seen this level of Lunar City before. That's because it was built in the past 18 months, Admiral Chen replied. Everything you see here, from the construction to the personnel to the technology running the displays, is classified at the highest levels. What I'm about to show you cannot leave this room without express authorization from the Colonial Security Council. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Colonial Security Council was Earth's most secretive organization, responsible for threats that couldn't be handled through normal diplomatic or military channels. She had heard rumors of its existence, but had never been sure it was real. Before we begin, the Admiral continued, I need you to understand something. For the past 4 years, your job as Earth's primary diplomatic representative has been to convince the galaxy that humanity is exactly what they think we are. Primitive, predictable, and harmless. You've done that job brilliantly. Thank you, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure it was meant as a compliment. What you don't know, Admiral Chen continued, is that your diplomatic mission was cover for something much more important. While you were showing the Council our obsolete ships and primitive weapons, our real military development has been proceeding on a completely different track. He nodded to someone Sarah couldn't see, and the room's displays shifted to show a technical schematic unlike anything she had ever seen. The ship on the screen was sleek and angular, with clean lines that seemed to bend space around them. There were no visible engines, no obvious weapon mounts, no external features that would identify it as human in origin. The UES Phantom, Admiral Chen said. The first vessel of its class, and possibly the most advanced warship in the galaxy. Sarah stared at the schematic in disbelief. That's impossible. Human technology can't produce anything like that. We don't have the industrial base, the material science, or the theoretical foundation. You're right, said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of Earth's Advanced Physics Research Division. We didn't. But we do now. Dr. Vasquez activated a new set of displays, showing what appeared to be mining operations in the outer solar system. But these weren't the simple asteroid miners that Earth was known for. These were massive installations that seemed to be processing materials on an industrial scale. 18 months ago, Dr. Vasquez continued, our deep space survey teams discovered something extraordinary in the Kuiper Belt. A derelict ship, ancient beyond anything we've ever encountered. The vessel had been drifting in the outer system for at least 50,000 years, possibly longer. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. A ship? From what species? Unknown, Dr. Vasquez replied. Whatever built it was gone long before any of the current galactic powers achieved spaceflight. The technology inside was so advanced that our initial survey teams couldn't even determine what most of it was supposed to do. Admiral Chen took over the explanation. We've spent the past year reverse engineering what we could and adapting it to human manufacturing capabilities. The results have been illuminating. The display shifted again, showing technical specifications that made Sarah's head spin, propulsion systems that manipulated space-time directly, weapons that functioned on principles she couldn't even pronounce, defensive systems that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. The cloaking technology alone, Dr. Vasquez said, operates on 17 different principles simultaneously. It doesn't just hide the ship from sensors, it makes the ship temporarily cease to exist in normal space-time. While cloaked, the Phantom exists in a pocket dimension that we can access, but which is invisible to every known form of detection. That's not possible, Sarah whispered. Neither was faster-than-light travel until we figured it out, Admiral Chen replied. The difference is that this time we figured it out in secret. Commander Park, who had been silent until now, activated another set of displays. These showed star charts with movement patterns marked in different colors. For the past 6 months, Park said, the Phantom has been conducting reconnaissance missions throughout Galactic Council space. We've surveyed military installations, observed fleet movements, and gathered intelligence on every major power's capabilities and weaknesses. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You've been spying on the entire galaxy. Not spying, Admiral Chen corrected. Preparing. For what? For the day when the laughter stops and the galaxy realizes what humanity actually is. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of people she had known and trusted for years. Scientists, military officers, intelligence analysts, all of them wearing expressions of grim determination. You're planning a war, she said. No, Admiral Chen replied. We're planning to prevent one. But to do that, we need the galaxy to understand that humanity is not the harmless junior partner they think we are. Dr. Vasquez activated a new set of displays, showing what appeared to be weapon test results. The numbers were staggering. The Phantom's primary armament, she explained, is something we're calling a quantum cascade cannon. Instead of firing projectiles or energy beams, it fires packets of altered space-time that cause matter to cease existing at the quantum level. The target doesn't just get destroyed, it gets retroactively erased from reality. Sarah felt sick. That's not a weapon. That's genocide technology. It's a deterrent, Admiral Chen said firmly. Just like nuclear weapons were a deterrent during Earth's Cold War period. The point is not to use it, but to make sure everyone knows it exists. And if they don't believe you?
Admiral Chen's expression grew cold.
Then we provide a demonstration. Commander Park activated a final set of displays, showing what appeared to be battle plans for every major galactic power's core systems. The galaxy's current balance of power is built on the assumption that advanced technology equals military superiority, Park explained. The Ethereal Collective believes their phase drives make them untouchable. The Hive Confederation thinks their adaptive bioships are invincible. The Stellar Dominion assumes their molecular manipulation gives them an insurmountable advantage. They're all wrong, Dr. Vasquez added. Quantum cascade weapons don't care about dimensional phases or adaptive biology or molecular manipulation. They operate at a level that precedes all of those technologies. Sarah stared at the battle plans, her diplomatic training warring with the horrifying implications of what she was seeing. This is insane, she said finally. You're talking about threatening the entire galaxy with weapons that could potentially wipe out entire species. We're talking about making sure that doesn't happen, Admiral Chen replied. Sarah, in the past year alone, 3 minor species have been completely enslaved by major powers. The Ethereal Collective has annexed 17 star systems. The Hive Confederation is conducting biological experiments on sentient populations. The galaxy's current power structure is built on oppression and exploitation. So you want to replace it with one built on fear? We want to replace it with one built on respect, Admiral Chen said. Fear is just the first step. The room fell silent as Sarah processed what she had learned. Everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was wrong. While she had been playing the role of the humble diplomat, her own species had been preparing for a conflict that could reshape galactic civilization. Why are you telling me this now? She asked finally. Because in 72 hours, Admiral Chen said, the Phantom is going to decloak in the middle of the Ethereal Collective's primary fleet base. We're going to announce humanity's true capabilities to the galaxy, and we need someone they trust to explain why we're doing it. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. You want me to go back to the Council and threaten them? We want you to go back to the Council and give them a choice, Admiral Chen corrected. They can continue treating humanity as a junior partner while secretly oppressing half the galaxy, or they can start treating all species as equals. And if they refuse, Admiral Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. Then they'll learn why humans have survived every existential threat they've ever faced. Sarah looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of people who had fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the galaxy without anyone knowing it was happening. "The alien derelict," she said finally. "Where did it really come from, Doctor?" Vasquez and Admiral Chen exchanged a look that Sarah couldn't interpret.
"We're not entirely sure, Dr. Dumit,"
Vasquez replied. "The technology is consistent with theoretical frameworks for a post-technological civilization. Something that had transcended physical limitations and achieved mastery over the fundamental forces of reality. Where are they now?" "Gone," Admiral Chen said simply. "Left this region of space sometime around the period when Earth's early civilizations were just discovering agriculture. But they left us a gift. A weapon. A tool," Admiral Chen corrected. "Like any tool, it can be used for construction or destruction. We've chosen construction. We're going to construct a galaxy where strength doesn't automatically mean the right to dominate others." Sarah stood up slowly, her mind still reeling from everything she had learned. "I need time to process this," she said. "You have 12 hours, Commander Park replied. "Then we need to begin preparing your return to the Council." Sarah nodded and headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. "The laughter," she said, "when they were mocking human technology. You knew it was going to happen." "We were counting on it," Admiral Chen replied.
Sarah, the first rule of any successful military strategy is to let your enemy underestimate you right up until the moment you prove them wrong.
As Sarah left the conference room and made her way back through the maze of corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking through a completely different world than the one she had left just hours earlier.
Humanity wasn't the galaxy's joke anymore. They were about to become its nightmare. Captain Marcus Rivera had served aboard 17 different vessels in his 20-year career with Earth's naval forces. He had commanded patrol boats, escort frigates, and mining station defense platforms. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, negotiated with hostile alien merchants, and survived 3 separate first contact scenarios that could have started wars. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for the UES Phantom. Standing on what the ship's designers generously called a bridge, Rivera watched his crew work with technology that seemed to operate more on intuition than engineering principles. The control interfaces were unlike anything in Earth's standard fleet, smooth surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch, displaying information in patterns that somehow made perfect sense, despite defying every interface design principle he had ever learned. "Captain," called Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her position at what they were calling the navigation station. "We're approaching the Ethereal Collective's primary fleet base. Quantum stealth is holding at maximum effectiveness." Rivera nodded, though he still wasn't entirely sure what quantum stealth meant. The technical briefings had been thorough but largely incomprehensible. Something about existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously while maintaining selective interaction with normal space-time. The important part was that it worked. The Phantom had passed within 1,000 kilometers of Ethereal Collective patrol ships without being detected. "Time to target?" he asked. 17 minutes to optimal decloaked position," replied Commander Jane Torres from the tactical station. "All systems are operating within expected parameters, though I should mention that expected is a relative term when dealing with technology we've had for less than 6 months. Rivera allowed himself a small smile. Torres had been his first officer on the UES Vigilant before they were both transferred to this assignment. Her dry humor was one of the few familiar things about this entire operation. "Admiral Chen sends his compliments," announced Communications Specialist David Park. "The diplomatic transport carrying Ambassador Chen is en route to the Galactic Council station. She'll be in position to deliver our message within hours of our demonstration." The demonstration. Rivera tried not to think about what they were about to do. The orders were clear. Decloak in the middle of the Ethereal Collective's most secure military installation, demonstrate the Phantom's capabilities without causing casualties, and then disappear before anyone could respond effectively. It was the kind of operation that would either announce humanity as a major galactic power or start a war that could consume entire star systems. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim called, "we're receiving automated challenges from the fleet base's outer perimeter. Standard identification requests." "Are we responding?" "Negative. The quantum stealth system is designed to be completely passive. Any response would compromise our position." Rivera watched the main display as it showed the Ethereal Collective's primary fleet base growing larger on their approach. The installation was massive, a crystalline structure that looked more like a work of art than a military facility. Hundreds of ethereal vessels moved in precise formations around the base, their own crystalline hulls gleaming with internal light. It was beautiful, Rivera had to admit. The ethereal collective might be arrogant and condescending, but they built things of genuine elegance. Their ships moved through space like living poetry, each one a masterpiece of engineering and aesthetic design. In a few minutes, all of that beauty was going to be overshadowed by the appearance of a human vessel that wasn't supposed to exist. All stations, prepare for decloak sequence, Rivera announced. This is not a drill, we go live in 10 minutes. The bridge crew acknowledged the order with quiet professionalism. They all knew what they were about to do, and they all understood the implications. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a moment that would fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Captain, Commander Torres said, I'm showing optimal firing solutions on 12 priority targets. The quantum cascade weapons are charged and ready. Remember, we're not here to start a war, Rivera replied. Target selection is limited to non-essential structures and unmanned installations. Understood. I've identified 3 sensor relay stations and a communications array that will provide sufficient demonstration of capability without risking lives. Rivera nodded. The plan was to show the galaxy what human weapons could do without actually killing anyone. It was a delicate balance. Demonstrate enough power to be taken seriously without committing acts that could be considered war crimes. 5 minutes to decloak, Lieutenant Kim announced. Rivera activated the ship's internal communications system. All hands, this is the captain. In 5 minutes, we will decloak and announce humanity's presence to the galaxy. Every one of you volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. Every one of you represents the best that Earth has to offer. Today, we stop being the galaxy's joke. Today, we become something they have to respect. He closed the channel and looked around the bridge at his crew. These were people who had been carefully selected not just for their technical skills, but for their ability to handle the psychological pressure of operating technology that shouldn't exist. They had trained for months on systems that violated known physics, preparing for a mission that could reshape galactic civilization. 2 minutes to decloak, Kim announced. On the main display, the Ethereal Collective's fleet base filled the entire screen. Rivera could see individual ships moving in their formations, crew members working on external maintenance platforms, the routine activities of a military installation that had no idea it was about to become part of history. Captain, Torres called. I'm detecting increased patrol activity around the base perimeter. 3 additional squadrons have moved to intercept positions. Rivera frowned. Are they responding to us?
Negative.
It appears to be a scheduled patrol rotation. Pure coincidence. Or terrible timing, Rivera muttered. More ships meant more witnesses, but it also meant a higher risk of someone doing something stupid and turning their demonstration into an actual battle. 1 minute to decloak. Rivera took a deep breath. In 60 seconds, the Phantom would become visible to every sensor in the system. The Ethereal Collective would realize that a completely unknown vessel had penetrated to the heart of their most secure installation. They would see technology that shouldn't exist, weapons that operated on principles they didn't understand, and capabilities that fundamentally altered the balance of power in their sector. 30 seconds to decloak. All systems ready. Rivera gripped the arms of his command chair. 20 years of military service, and it all came down to this moment. Everything humanity had achieved. Everything they hoped to become, balanced on the edge of the next few minutes. 10 seconds to decloak. Quantum stealth disengaging in 3, 2, 1, decloak. The main display shifted as the Phantom dropped out of its pocket dimension and returned to normal space-time. Around them, the Ethereal Collective's fleet base suddenly filled with activity as sensors that had been reading empty space suddenly detected a massive, unknown vessel sitting in the middle of their most secure formation. We have multiple targeting locks, Torres announced. 15 ships have weapons trained on us. They're demanding identification and surrender. Communications broadcast our prepared message on all frequencies, Rivera ordered. David Park activated the transmission system. Broadcasting now, Captain. All Ethereal Collective vessels and installations should be receiving our message. The message was simple. This is Captain Marcus Rivera of the United Earthship Phantom. We come in peace, but we come with the power to defend that peace. Humanity requests recognition as an equal partner in galactic affairs. This is a demonstration of our capabilities, not an act of war. On the main display, Rivera watched ethereal vessels scrambling to respond to their presence. Ships that had been in routine patrols were breaking formation and moving to intercept positions. The base's defensive systems were powering up, their crystalline weapon arrays beginning to glow with charged energy. "Captain," Torres called, "I'm detecting weapons charging across the fleet. They're preparing to fire on us." Rivera had expected this. The Ethereal Collective's first response to an unknown threat would be to eliminate it. Diplomacy would come later, if at all. "Begin demonstration sequence," he ordered. "Target the communications array first." Torres activated the quantum cascade weapons. On the main display, Rivera watched as a beam of twisted space-time lanced out from the Phantom and struck the fleet base's primary communications array. The effect was unlike anything he had ever seen. The target didn't explode or disintegrate. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind a perfectly spherical void where the structure had been moments before. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ethereal vessel in range opened fire simultaneously, filling space around the Phantom with energy beams, plasma discharges, and exotic particles that made the ship's proximity alarms scream warnings. None of it touched them. The Phantom's defensive systems operated on the same principles as its stealth technology. Instead of absorbing or deflecting incoming attacks, they caused the ship to exist slightly outside normal space-time. The ethereal weapons passed through the space where the ship appeared to be, but found nothing to hit. "Demonstration target 2, Rivera ordered. Torres fired again, and one of the base's sensor relay stations vanished into non-existence. Then a third target and a fourth. Each shot was precise, eliminating infrastructure without harming personnel, showing exactly the kind of surgical precision that made the quantum cascade weapons so terrifying. "Captain," Park called from communications, "we're receiving transmissions from the fleet base commander. They're requesting parley." "Tell them we'll accept their surrender," Rivera replied, knowing it would provoke exactly the response he wanted. The effect was instantaneous. Every ethereal vessel in the system converged on their position, weapons blazing. The fleet base itself began to move, its massive crystalline structure rotating to bring its heaviest weapons to bear. And still nothing could touch the Phantom. "Begin Phase 2, Rivera ordered. Torres shifted targets from infrastructure to weapon systems. One by one, the ethereal ships found their weapon arrays simply disappearing. Not destroyed, not disabled. Erased from reality as if they had never existed. Within minutes, the entire fleet was effectively disarmed. "Now show them what we could have done instead," Rivera said. Torres activated a different weapon system, one they hoped never to use in actual combat. A single quantum cascade pulse, carefully modulated to affect only inanimate matter, swept through the fleet formation. Every ethereal vessel found its hull armor and defensive systems temporarily erased from reality, leaving them completely vulnerable for exactly 3 seconds before the effect wore off and their protection returned. The message was clear. If the Phantom had wanted to destroy the entire fleet, it could have done so without effort. "Communications," Rivera called, broadcast the message from Admiral Chen. Park activated the prepared transmission, sending Admiral Chen's words across every frequency the Ethereal Collective used. The message was formal but unmistakable. Humanity was no longer content to be treated as a junior partner. Earth demanded recognition as an equal power, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The response from the fleet base was immediate. A request for immediate negotiations and a cessation of hostilities. "Tell them we'll consider their request," Rivera replied. "But first, they need to understand something." He activated the ship's external communications himself, broadcasting directly to every vessel in the system. "This is Captain Rivera of the UES Phantom. For the past 6 months, this ship has visited every major installation in Ethereal Collective space. We have surveyed your defensive positions, catalogued your weapon capabilities, and identified your strategic weaknesses. We have done this without your knowledge, without your permission, and without any ability on your part to detect or prevent it." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "We could have destroyed this installation and everyone in it before you knew we were here. We could have assassinated your leadership, sabotaged your infrastructure, or crippled your entire civilization. We chose not to because humanity prefers peace to war. But do not mistake our preference for weakness." The quantum cascade weapons fired one final time, targeting the fleet base's primary power core. Instead of destroying it, the beam created a temporary void that lasted exactly 10 seconds, long enough for every system in the installation to shut down and restart, demonstrating that the Phantom could have crippled the entire base permanently if it had chosen to do so. Humanity requests a place at the table of galactic civilization, Rivera continued. Not as a junior partner or a resource provider, but as an equal power with equal rights. We hope this can be achieved through negotiation, but if necessary, it will be achieved through other means. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of systems that shouldn't exist running on principles that defied conventional understanding. Captain, Torres reported, the ethereal fleet is standing down. All weapons are powered down, and they're requesting formal diplomatic contact. Rivera nodded. Communications, send our response. Tell them that Ambassador Chen will be arriving at the Galactic Council station within hours. She will be authorized to negotiate on behalf of Earth's interests. Message sent, Captain. Rivera looked around the bridge at his crew. They had just announced humanity's emergence as a galactic power in the most dramatic way possible. From now on, Earth would never again be dismissed as primitive or harmless. Navigation, prepare for quantum stealth engagement, he ordered. We're going home. Stealth systems ready, Captain. Engage. The Phantom slipped back into its pocket dimension, vanishing from normal space-time as completely as if it had never existed. Around them, the ethereal collective's fleet found itself alone once again, left to contemplate the implications of what they had just witnessed. Somewhere in the dark between stars, humanity's most advanced warship began its journey home, carrying with it the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same. The laughter had finally stopped. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the Phantom's demonstration at the Ethereal Collective's fleet base. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again in the center of the Grand Assembly. But this time, the massive amphitheater was filled with a very different energy than before. Where there had once been condescending amusement, there was now barely controlled panic. The holographic displays above her head no longer showed humanity's primitive warships or outdated technology. Instead, they showed sensor recordings from the ethereal fleet base, impossible readings of a vessel that appeared and disappeared at will, weapons that erased matter from reality itself, and defensive systems that made their attacker completely untouchable.
Honored representatives, Sarah began. But her voice was immediately drowned out by a cacophony of demands, accusations, and barely coherent questions from the assembled delegates.
Silence! The command came from Zextai the Magnificent, whose crystalline form was pulsing with an angry red glow.
Let the human speak. I want to hear her explain how her species went from primitive savages to whatever this is. The assembly fell quiet, but Sarah could feel the tension radiating from every delegate. These were beings who had built their entire political and social systems on the assumption of their own technological superiority. The Phantom's demonstration had shattered that assumption completely. Thank you, honored Zextai, Sarah replied calmly. I am here to discuss humanity's request for recognition as an equal power within the Galactic Council. Equal power? The outrage came from Councillor Vorth, whose massive insectoid form was practically vibrating with indignation. Human Sarah, your species has gone from being an amusing curiosity to an existential threat in less than a standard day. You will explain how this is possible, and you will explain it now. Sarah had prepared for this moment during her journey back to the Council station. Admiral Chen's briefings had been thorough about how the galaxy's powers would respond to the revelation of humanity's true capabilities. Fear, anger, and demands for explanations were all predictable responses. With respect, Councillor Vorth, Sarah replied, humanity's technological development has proceeded exactly as we have publicly reported. The UES Defiance and vessels like it represent our standard military capabilities. Then explain the ship that attacked our installation. Zextai's form flared brighter. Explain weapons that erase matter from existence. Explain stealth technology that makes a vessel completely undetectable. The vessel in question was not human, Sarah said, and the lie came easily because she had been practicing it for hours. We believe it was constructed by an unknown third party using technology salvaged from ancient ruins in the outer solar system. The assembly erupted again, this time with demands for proof, threats of investigation, and barely coherent theories about secret alliances and hidden technologies. Sarah waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. However, she said, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Humanity has been in communication with the operators of this vessel. We have been informed that their intervention was conducted on our behalf, in response to what they perceived as discriminatory treatment by the major galactic powers. High Archon Talmesh of the Sacred Orders leaned forward in his seat. You are claiming that some unknown species has appointed themselves humanity's protectors? Not protectors, Sarah corrected. Advocates. They have made it clear that they consider humanity's treatment by the Council to be unacceptable, and they are prepared to take further action if necessary. It was a masterful piece of misdirection. By claiming that the Phantom belonged to a mysterious third party, Sarah was simultaneously denying human responsibility for the attack while making it clear that humanity now had powerful allies. The galaxy's powers would have to consider the possibility that there were unknown forces operating in their space, forces that were apparently willing to use overwhelming technology to support Earth's interests. This is preposterous, Vorth's mandibles clicked furiously.
You expect us to believe that some previously unknown species has suddenly appeared to champion humanity's cause?
I expect you to believe the evidence, Sarah replied. Your own sensor readings confirm that the vessel used technology far in advance of anything humanity has demonstrated.
The logical conclusion is that it was built by someone else. Then who? The question came from the representative of the Void Touched, their telepathic projection carrying overtones of fear and suspicion. Who has been operating in our space without our knowledge? Sarah spread her hands in a gesture of ignorance. We know very little about them. They have chosen to communicate with humanity through encrypted channels and anonymous contacts. What we do know is that they consider the current galactic power structure to be inadequate. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Inadequate, not just unfair or flawed, but fundamentally insufficient to meet their standards. What do they want? Asked the representative from the Stellar Dominion, their mercury-like form rippling with anxiety. Recognition of humanity as an equal power within the Council, Sarah replied. An end to discriminatory practices against younger species. A more equitable distribution of resources and territories. And if we refuse? Zextai's voice carried the chill of absolute zero. Sarah's expression didn't change. I would assume they would take whatever action they deemed necessary to achieve their objectives. The assembly fell completely silent. Sarah could practically hear the mental calculations being performed by every delegate. How many of these mysterious ships existed? What were their full capabilities? How could the galaxy's established powers defend against technology that rendered their own weapons useless? This is blackmail, Councillor Vorth said finally. This is diplomacy, Sarah corrected. Humanity is requesting a seat at the table of galactic governance. Our advocates have demonstrated that they have the power to enforce that request if necessary, but we would prefer to achieve our goals through negotiation. High Archon Telmish activated a private communication channel, engaging in rapid consultation with his advisors. Around the assembly, other delegates were doing the same. Sarah waited patiently, knowing that they were all asking the same questions. How could they respond to a threat they couldn't understand or counter? Human Sarah, Telmesh said finally, you will understand that we cannot simply grant your species equal status based on the threats of unknown entities. We require guarantees, assurances that these advocates will not use their capabilities against other members of the Council. I can provide no such guarantees, Sarah replied. However, I can tell you that their interest appears to be limited to ensuring fair treatment for humanity and other younger species. If such treatment were provided, I believe they would have no reason to take further action. It was another careful half-truth. The being Sarah was describing didn't actually exist. The Phantom and its sister ships were entirely human constructions. But by presenting Earth's new capabilities as belonging to mysterious allies, she was giving the Council a face-saving way to accept humanity's demands while avoiding direct confrontation with human technology. You spoke of other younger species, observed the representative from the Crimson Empire. Are you suggesting that these entities might intervene on behalf of others besides humanity? Sarah nodded gravely. Their communications have indicated concern about the treatment of several species that have been subjected to what they term exploitative arrangements with major powers. The implications were staggering. If these mysterious entities were willing to intervene on behalf of any species they perceived as being treated unfairly, then the entire galactic power structure was potentially under threat. Every territorial expansion, every trade agreement that favored advanced species over primitive ones, every act of technological or cultural imperialism could potentially trigger intervention. This changes everything, whispered the representative from the Nova Ascendancy, their geometric form flickering with distress patterns. Indeed it does, Sarah agreed. Which is why humanity believes it would be beneficial for all parties to establish a new framework for galactic relations. one based on mutual respect rather than technological dominance. Zextai's crystalline form had dimmed to a pale blue, indicating deep contemplation. What exactly are you proposing, human? Sarah activated her own holographic displays, showing prepared proposals that had been developed by Earth's diplomatic corps over the past several months. First, formal recognition of humanity as a major power within the Council, with all associated rights and privileges. Second, the establishment of new protocols for first contact and integration of emerging spacefaring species. Third, the creation of an oversight body to monitor and prevent exploitative relationships between advanced and developing civilizations. The proposals were comprehensive and carefully crafted to appeal to the Council's stated values while fundamentally restructuring the galaxy's power dynamics. By framing them as measures to prevent intervention by the mysterious entities, Sarah was making it seem like the Council would be protecting themselves rather than submitting to human demands. These proposals would require substantial changes to existing treaties and territorial arrangements, observed Councillor Vorth. Yes, they would, Sarah agreed. But consider the alternative. If these entities decide that the current system cannot be reformed, they might choose to restructure it themselves. End quote. The threat was implicit but clear. The galaxy could either reform its systems voluntarily or risk having them reformed by beings with incomprehensible technology and unknown motivations. High Archon Telmesh consulted with his advisors again before speaking. Assuming the Council were to consider these proposals, what assurances could you provide regarding the behavior of these entities during the negotiation process? I can relay your concerns to our contacts, Sarah replied. I believe they would be willing to refrain from further demonstrations, provided they see evidence of good faith negotiations. And if the negotiations fail? Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral. I would assume they would resume their advocacy activities. The euphemism was chilling. Advocacy activities that could erase matter from existence and penetrate the most secure military installations in the galaxy. We will need time to consider these proposals, Zextai announced. This session is adjourned, pending consultation with our respective governments. As the delegates began filing out of the assembly chamber, Sarah remained standing in the center of the amphitheater. She had accomplished exactly what Admiral Chen had hoped for. The galaxy's powers were now terrified of humanity's mysterious allies and willing to consider fundamental changes to avoid further confrontation. The beautiful irony was that humanity's greatest diplomatic victory had been achieved by convincing their enemies that they weren't responsible for their own success. By hiding their true capabilities behind the fiction of alien benefactors, Earth had gained all the benefits of possessing advanced technology without taking responsibility for its use. As Sarah prepared to leave the chamber, she noticed that several delegates were remaining behind for private conversations. The real negotiations would begin now, in closed sessions and secret meetings, where the galaxy's powers would try to find ways to accommodate Earth's demands without completely surrendering their own advantages. It was going to be a complex process, but Sarah was confident in the outcome. The galaxy had spent 47 years laughing at humanity's primitive technology and brute force engineering. Now they were going to discover that sometimes brute force engineering produces results that elegant solutions cannot match. The laughter had stopped. Now came the real work of rebuilding galactic civilization on foundations that wouldn't crumble the next time someone underestimated the species that had learned to split atoms before they learned to fly. 6 months after the Phantom's demonstration at the Ethereal Collective's fleet base, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the Great Recalibration. The Galactic Council had undergone the most comprehensive restructuring in its 3,000-year history, and humanity now sat at the table as one of the recognized major powers. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of the newly expanded Council Station, observing the changes that had transformed galactic civilization. Where once the station had been dominated by the elegant architecture of the ancient powers, now there were sections designed to accommodate species that had previously been considered too primitive for full membership. The Kepler Alliance, the Centauri Federation, and dozens of other young civilizations now had permanent representation in the council chamber. But the most significant changes weren't architectural, they were political. Sarah entered Conference Room 7, where she had been meeting with the council's new oversight committee for the past 3 hours. The committee had been established as part of the reforms demanded by humanity's mysterious advocates, and its mandate was to prevent the kind of exploitative relationships that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. Ambassador Chen greeted Chairman Colvis of the Reformed Hegemony Coalition. We've completed our review of the Ethereal Collective's territorial expansion in the Outer Rim. The committee finds their actions to be in violation of the new protocols regarding emerging species protection. Sarah nodded, consulting her datapad. Ethereal Collective had been attempting to claim 3-star systems inhabited by pre-spaceflight civilizations, arguing that the species in question showed no signs of technological development potential. Under the old system, this would have been perfectly legal. Under the new protocols, it was considered a serious violation.
What sanctions are you recommending? Sarah asked.
Immediate withdrawal from the disputed systems and reparations to be paid into the Emerging Species Development Fund, replied committee member Telvor of the Stellar Dominion. Additionally, the collective will be required to submit all future expansion plans to this committee for review. It was a stunning reversal of the power dynamics that had governed galactic civilization for thousands of years. The Ethereal Collective, one of the galaxy's oldest and most technologically advanced civilizations, was being forced to submit to oversight by a committee that included representatives from species they had been dismissing as primitive just months earlier. Any objections to this recommendation? Sarah asked. There were none. Even the representative from the Ethereal Collective's allies remained silent. Everyone knew that objecting to the committee's decisions might provoke intervention from humanity's mysterious benefactors. Excellent, Sarah said. I'll forward the committee's ruling to the relevant parties. As the meeting concluded and the various representatives filed out, Sarah remained behind with Chairman Kolvas. The insectoid being had become one of her closest collaborators in the New Order, despite representing a species that had been openly hostile to humanity just a year earlier. Another successful resolution, Kolvas observed, his mandibles clicking in what Sarah had learned was his species' equivalent of a satisfied smile. The collective's expansion has been curtailed, 3 emerging civilizations have been protected from exploitation, and the precedent has been reinforced that technological superiority does not grant the right to dominate others. Indeed, Sarah agreed. How many cases are we reviewing next week? 17, Kolvas replied, including a particularly complex situation involving the Hive Confederation's biological research projects. It appears they've been conducting experiments on sentient populations without proper consent protocols. Sarah's expression hardened. The Hive Confederation's practices had been one of the most disturbing discoveries of the new oversight process. Their adaptive biotechnology required genetic material from other species, and they had been obtaining it through methods that could only be described as exploitative. Recommendations? Complete cessation of non-consensual research activities, full disclosure of all existing projects, and reparations to affected populations, Kolvas replied. The committee is also considering requiring the Confederation to share their medical advances with the species they've been experimenting on. It was poetic justice, Sarah thought. The Hive Confederation would be forced to provide their victims with the very technology they had been developing through their exploitation. Any resistance from the Confederation? Some grumbling, but nothing serious, Kolvas admitted. Ever since the incident at the Ethereal Fleet Base, no one has been willing to seriously challenge the committee's authority. Sarah nodded. The fiction of humanity's mysterious allies had proven remarkably effective at maintaining order in the new system. Even though no one had seen these entities since the Phantom's demonstration, the mere possibility of their intervention was enough to ensure compliance with the new protocols. Chairman, Sarah said, I've been meaning to ask you about something. Your species was initially quite hostile to these reforms. What changed? Kolvas's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Ambassador Chen, my species has survived for over 10,000 years by recognizing when the balance of power has fundamentally shifted. When beings with incomprehensible technology announce that they're going to restructure galactic civilization, the wise response is to position yourself on their side. And if these beings decided that the reforms weren't sufficient? If they demanded even more radical changes, Kolvas was quiet for a long moment. Then we would implement those changes, he said finally, because the alternative appears to be extinction. As Sarah left the conference room and made her way toward the diplomatic quarters, she reflected on how completely the galaxy had been transformed by a single demonstration of advanced technology. The mere possibility that humanity's allies might intervene again had reshaped political relationships that had been stable for millennia. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Sarah activated a privacy screen and opened the transmission. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Harrison Chen's face appeared in the hologram. Congratulations on another successful committee session. The situation with the Ethereal Collective has been resolved exactly as we hoped. Thank you, Admiral, Sarah replied. The new system seems to be working remarkably well. The threat of intervention is maintaining order without requiring actual intervention. Indeed. However, we may need to provide another demonstration soon. Sarah felt a chill. Why? Intelligence reports indicate that several powers are beginning to question whether our allies actually exist, Admiral Chen explained. There's been no contact from these entities since the initial demonstration, and some council members are starting to wonder if the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. The possibility had always existed. Eventually, someone would realize that humanity's mysterious benefactors were remarkably absent for beings who had claimed to be monitoring galactic affairs. The longer the fiction went without reinforcement, the more likely it was that someone would call humanity's bluff. What are you recommending? Another demonstration, but more subtle this time, Admiral Chen replied. We're planning a reconnaissance mission to the Hive Confederation's primary research facilities. Nothing destructive, just evidence that our allies are still watching and still concerned about the treatment of younger species. Sarah nodded. The Phantom sister ships had been completed over the past 6 months, giving Earth a small but incredibly capable fleet of stealth vessels. Another demonstration of their capabilities would reinforce the fiction of humanity's alien allies while gathering intelligence on potential threats. When? 2 weeks. We'll coordinate with your committee schedule to ensure maximum impact. The transmission ended, and Sarah made her way to her quarters. Through the observation windows, she could see the traffic patterns around the council station, ships from dozens of species, moving in formations that would have been impossible under the old system. Young civilizations that had never been allowed full representation now sent their own vessels to attend council sessions. Ancient powers that had once dominated entire sectors now traveled under the watchful eyes of oversight committees. It was a fundamentally different galaxy than the one humanity had encountered 50 years earlier, more just, more equitable, and more respectful of the rights of emerging species. It had been achieved through deception and intimidation, but the results were undeniably positive. Sarah's personal communicator chimed with a message from her grandfather. She opened it to find a simple question. Any regrets? She considered the question carefully. Humanity had lied to the entire galaxy, threatened the established powers with weapons they couldn't understand, and fundamentally restructured galactic civilization based on fiction and fear. By any reasonable moral standard, their actions were questionable at best, but the results spoke for themselves. 36 emerging civilizations now had protection from exploitation. The galaxy's resources were being distributed more fairly. Scientific advances were being shared rather than hoarded. The strong were no longer automatically granted the right to dominate the weak. Sarah composed her response. None at all. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah thought about the species that had once laughed at humanity's primitive technology and brute force engineering. They had assumed that because human methods were different, they were inferior. They had mistaken humanity's youth for weakness and their directness for stupidity. They had learned, perhaps too late, that evolution doesn't always reward elegance over effectiveness. Sometimes the crude solution is the one that works when elegant approaches fail. Sometimes brute force engineering produces results that millennia of refined development cannot match. And sometimes, the species that everyone underestimates is the one that changes everything. The galaxy had stopped laughing at humanity. Now they respected them, feared their mysterious allies, and followed their lead in building a more equitable civilization. It wasn't the outcome anyone had expected when humans first stumbled into galactic politics with their crude ships and primitive weapons. But it was, Sarah reflected, a very human kind of victory, achieved through determination, ingenuity, and the absolute refusal to accept that being different meant being lesser. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance, but now they danced to a rhythm that included humanity's voice. The cosmic joke had become the cosmic truth. Never underestimate the species that learned to split atoms before they learned to fly, because they might just teach the galaxy something about the relationship between power and responsibility. The laughter had ended. The real work of building a better galaxy had begun, and in the depths of space, invisible to all senses and existing in dimensions that conventional physics couldn't touch, the UES Phantom and her sister ships continued their silent patrol, ensuring that the new order would be maintained and that no one would ever again mistake humanity's preference for peace as evidence of weakness. The galaxy had learned to respect the humans. Now it was time to learn to deserve that respect in return.